Now, when we last spoke, I think you talked about quantum computers running in like sub-zero temperatures and trying to play with the physics around that. Where are we on that journey? Because that's clearly a limiting factor for mass adoption.
Well, yes and no. So there's a number of different qubit technologies. So you might have heard of photonic qubits. They use photons and lasers, and they operate at room temperature. Brilliant.
Oh,
but they operate in a perfect vacuum. And it turns out it's almost as difficult to create a perfect vacuum as it is to create near to absolute zero that we operate our qubits at. So the type of qubits that IBM's chosen to use, the superconducting transmon qubits as they're called, operate very close to absolute zero, 15 millikelvin. So 15 thousandths of a degree C above absolute zero, so minus 270 something degrees C. That's colder than deep space. The background Hawking radiation is about 4 Kelvin. So that's balmy by comparison with 15 millikelvin. So we have to get it down to that temperature. Turns out it's not too difficult because you haven't got to make the whole computer that temperature, just a tiny little tin can at the bottom where the qubits are housed. So you might have seen pictures of this big, shiny, hands on the steering wheel, chandelier. That's actually a fridge.
Actually, Harry, can we cut in a picture of a quantum computer at the right? They are awesome.
I'm sure we can. That gets you from 40 Kelvin at the top of the stack down to the 15 millikelvin at the bottom, using different isotopes of helium as the refrigerant. And we have these things called Josephson junctions, which actually make up the qubits, and we nudge the qubits, moving the dot around on the sphere, using teensy-weensy microwave pulses. And that's the reason why you get decoherence after a few microseconds, is because, as we know, if you fire microwaves at things, they heat up.
Yeah.
The key is to use as smaller pulses as possible for as short a time as possible in order to make the qubits respond to our instructions.
So this all feels really complicated, as we keep saying, yeah? And it feels like doesn't feel very real right now. If you've got all this complicated physics stuff going on, have you got a view on when quantum computing will become mainstream in the future?
So we talk about a date we call quantum advantage, which is when you can do something actually useful on a quantum computer that you can't do on a classical computer, or rather you can do it better or quicker on a quantum computer than on a classical computer. We haven't quite crossed that stage yet. We're in a sort of no man's land just before it that we call quantum utility, which is where they're starting to become useful. So they haven't passed that point yet, but you can see it's on the horizon. And we've gone on record as saying that we think we'll pass the quantum advantage point in 2 years, so 2026, 27. At that point, you'll be able to do something, and it won't be general purpose computing, it'll be some very specific thing. We think it'll probably be in the computational chemistry area that you can't do on a classical computer. So you might say, well, that's still somewhat theoretical, and yes, agreed, but the point is that we're on the way to having something useful with quantum computers.
Amazing. So it's a 2-year horizon for usefulness, but in the reality, it's going to be a long time before everyone's buying one, if at all. And but like you said previously, it's unlikely people are going to own their own. It'll be in the cloud somewhere. They'll buy an hour of quantum processing or whatever. So we're very much adopting to the cloud model. And that already exists?
Absolutely, yeah. So since 2016, IBM's been making our quantum computers available on the cloud through an API. And to be honest, that's probably the best way of using them at the moment, because they are quite tricky to keep working, and the helium's very expensive for the refrigerant, and you have to know what you're doing to run them. And also we keep inventing these new chips with more qubits on them, so probably best to let us run the systems than just access them across the internet. And it's a bit like phone plans. There's a free tier where you can get free access to them, which is helping people learn about quantum computing, which, as I said, is really, really important. But then there's pay-as-you-go plans and so many gigabytes a month type plans where you get so many seconds of compute time per month. Or you can actually buy or reserve a chunk of a quantum computer and it's yours. We've got a fleet of, I think it's 16.
Can you turn into the wave, mate?
Quantum computers in our quantum computing center in Poughkeepsie, New York. And those are all online for people to use, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. So, as a procurement professional, people don't need to worry about it now, but you mentioned something when we weren't filming, which is Y2Q.
Aha, yeah.
Based on the Y2K thing from a few years ago, from year 2000, it feels like we're gearing up to a critical moment. Do you want to just explain what that is?
Yeah, so we refer to this as quantum safe security. And the cause of the problem is a guy called Peter Shaw, who in the 1990s, invented an algorithm that's referred to as Shaw's algorithm, which can factorize numbers. Now, on a classical computer, multiplying two numbers together is really easy. Factorizing them, in other words, unmultiplying them together, is really difficult. So finding the two numbers that were multiplied together to make a number is really hard. It's one of those intractable or exponentially nasty problems. Now, Shaw's algorithm gives you a polynomial time algorithm for factorizing numbers. In other words, in a sensible amount of time. So in maybe a few weeks rather than a billion years, you could factorize the key that we use, that we rely on for the security of our public key encryption systems. So algorithms like RSA, anything to do with public key, and that's used absolutely everywhere. Every time you DocuSign a document to say it was by you, every time you pay by tap, every time you establish a secure internet connection to Amazon to buy something, you're using public key infrastructure to secure that connection. So in a few years, and we'll come back to that in a second, people who want to will be able to crack that encryption. Now this is really problematic if you've got secrets that you need to keep secret, and a lot of companies have, and a lot of states have as well. Now the Y2Q reference is the date when we'll have a cryptographically relevant quantum computer, and we absolutely haven't got one of those yet. And if you'd have asked me this about 4 weeks ago, I'd have said that day is about 20 to 30 years away. But about 3 weeks ago, IBM made an announcement saying that our roadmap for an error-corrected, quite a lot bigger quantum computer that we'd previously slated for 2033 has just come into 2029, taking 4 years off that estimate. So we now think that Y2Q, this time when you can crack RSA 2048-bit encryption, is probably in the 2030 to 2035 time horizon, so less than 10 years. The reason that's worrying, for those of you old enough to remember Y2K, is that Y2K was only the biggest non-event in IT history because a whole bunch of us spent the 10 years before getting systems ready to accept the extra 2 digits in their dates. We haven't got 10 years to make that transition to post-quantum cryptography, which requires all the algorithms in your infrastructure, all the way they communicate, all the way documents are signed, all the way data is encrypted on disk, over to
Bitcoin.
new standards. Sorry?
Bitcoin, crypto.
Bitcoin indeed is also susceptible. Yep, so all that's got to change before Y2Q, because at that point people will be able to decrypt things, change them, and then re-encrypt them as if they were theirs, which is going to cause a lot of havoc.
So interesting times ahead. I suppose, so as a procurement guy, or lady, obviously a professional, you need to be thinking about this now. You might get approached by your technology stakeholders now to talk about quantum and what they're doing, but even if they're buying pieces of secure technology, cyber technology, that sort of stuff, you need to be thinking about quantum safe. I'm thinking, why don't we get into Newtown Creek, look for some seals and talk about that a bit more?
That sounds very good. Okay.